College sports are about to change forever. Amateurism in the NCAA is no more. The power conferences and the NCAA have agreed to a settlement in the House v. NCAA case that requires $2.7 billion in back payment damages across the next 10 years and opens a path for schools to pay players directly. As was the case when the NIL was introduced into college sports a few short years ago as a result of a prior court case, there are no training wheels, and right now it's a free-for-all amongst the various schools. Currently, another case is ongoing in federal court in Colorado that could end the possibility of salary caps in the NCAA if athletes win in the Fontenot versus NCAA case. A lot of questions remain as to how paying athletes will be implemented. How will this affect walk-on athletes? How does Title IX factor in? Will schools have to make significant cuts to rosters? How will this affect recruitment pitches? How do non-revenue sports fit into this jigsaw puzzle? This will be an extremely difficult process to work through for athletic directors as they face a multitude of brand new decisions that have to be made, both financially and legally, as they're going to have to make the revenue that their athletic programs bring in stretch farther. We're entering a whole new realm of the unknown, and there was already a lot of blindness in the last few years with NIL. Chaos is about to ensue. Today is Friday, May 24th. I'm Matt Menson, and welcome to the Cornfield Sports Pod. As always, Blake Peterson is on the mic as well. Howdy, howdy.
You couldn't have ended that monologue in such a great fashion. Chaos is about to ensue.
There's no guardrails at all.
No, there's not.
But before we get to this, let's go through our pro sports that are actually being played right now. Let's start with baseball. We'll work our way through baseball. Go to the NBA, and then we'll get into this college stuff because this is going to be big. But let's start with baseball. We don't usually start with the NL Central. Let's start with the NL Central today. Milwaukee Brewers, 28-21, first in the NL Central. This last week did not go as planned for them. I predicted that they might actually be able to rattle off 6 wins in the last week, and that did not happen. Not even close.
The top of the NL Central it's definitely tumbling.
Regardless of a bad week, though, the Brewers are still somehow finding a way to pull away.
They are.
But yeah, 1-2 with the Astros, 1-2 with the Marlins, including a 3-2 loss in extras. But yeah, despite that rough week, the NL Central is starting to look like it's the Brewers to lose. The Cubs can't find a way to put together a better week than Milwaukee, and we'll get to that in just a second, because even though the Brewers had a bad week, the Cubs had a worse week. But it's the bullpen that's holding everything together for Milwaukee right now. Their bullpen is leading the MLB with 17 wins as of today. Nobody else has that many. But their bullpen is picking up slack from the starters who have the least innings pitched in the MLB right now. And this is one of the things we talked about at the end of last season, that Milwaukee might end up with some problems with their rotation, or with their pitching just in general. Not having Brandon Woodruff be available for the rest of the season, trading away Corbin Burns. They lost their 2 best pitchers in the starting rotation. And, so Freddie Peralta, who was their 3rd guy last year, is their top guy now. And their rotation is not exactly a winning formula for Milwaukee, but everybody else is pulling stuff together to get wins for them right now, and their bullpen has just come out and shined. That wasn't something we predicted at the start of the year. That wasn't something we predicted at the end of last year, but that is the way we're sitting right now. On the offensive side of the ball, not really sure anybody predicted Bryce Turang was going to be this good, but he has been a pleasant surprise following up his rookie season, which was just kind of mediocre last year, maybe sub-mediocre. But right now, he's batting .310, which is 13th in the MLB. And generally speaking, your cutoff for a good hitter is .280. So he's doing really, really good right now. Like, he's almost certainly an all-star. But I think even more notable is how he's performing on the road against crowds that are, not friendly. He's hitting 363 on the road with a 408 on base percentage. I mean, that's wild. You don't do that on the road. And he's 18 for 18 in stolen base attempts. The guy's fast. He's playing decent at second base. But for comparison here, his average last year was 218. So to go from 218 to 310 is just kind of absurd. Like, that doesn't happen. And his slug rate increased from 300 to 426. His batting average right now is higher than his slugging rate last year, Blake. I can't think of any instance off the top of my head of that happening, and I'm sure it's happened before. I can guarantee you it's happened before. But a turnaround like that with this big of a sample size, because we're well into the season now. It's not like we're only 10 games in or something like that. That's wild to have your batting average for this season go above your slug rate from last year. But yeah, upcoming for the Brewers here, they're going to have a 3-game series at the Red Sox. Tonight's game is going to be a national broadcast on Apple TV Plus. They'll follow that game up with a 4-game series versus the Cubs. Speaking of the Cubs, last week 1-3 versus the Pirates and 1-2 versus the Braves. So yeah, one more loss than the Brewers.
Literally, Cubs still in shambles. Still,
they can't put it together. They just can't.
As much as their bullpen
is doing bad.
Yes,
their bullpen is garbage.
Aside from 2 notable people, I'll get to that in a second. But my gosh,
their rotation's fine.
Yeah, but I just see like my Cubs friends, and they're just not having a good time.
You mean you aren't having a good time over there, Cubby?
Oh, I'm not even that diehard into Cubs, okay? I just work for them, okay?
Yeah, you're a Cubs fan. We all know it. But yeah, I mean, the Cubs rotation is I mean, that is the centerpiece of that team.
But Shota Imanaga, like, he can't do everything. He can't do everything.
I mean, you got a starting pitcher. Your starting pitcher only plays once every 5 games, so.
Yeah. But I did want to highlight Shota Imanaga for a second, because definitely the Cubs shining light on the mound, like, and the only loss, or his only loss, was against the Braves last Monday. But the reason he does so good is not by like his pitches themselves, but not like the fastballs, but like the way he delivers them.
Right, it's all about ball spin. Japan has done an incredible job of developing pitchers recently. I mean, obviously Shohei Ohtani gets a lot of headlines, but like Yu Darvish is a good pitcher too, and he came well before Ohtani did. But yeah, that's
the way he just releases them.
It's
the ball,
spin right
the
on the ball.
Looks hittable. The ball looks hittable until it's not. He can get the spin down that good.
It's how fast can you spin the ball? You get, more of that sideways spin on a slider or a sweeper, it's gonna break more. You get more down spin on a curveball, it's gonna dive more. You get, more of that downward side spin type of thing on a sinker, the more it's gonna break into the more it's gonna break, your opposite of your slider. But yeah, if you don't get good spin, it's not gonna break anywhere.
And the times that he does pitch a fastball and like they go for it, they're just gonna foul it off.
And that's location. Imanaga's great at locating. He has good command of the zone.
Porter Hodge also had a great MLB debut after thriving in the minor leagues. He spent most of his time with the Tennessee Smokies. He was at the Iowa Cubs briefly this year.
Yeah, he got called up quick. They didn't waste any time with him.
Nah. During the Braves, he took down some of the best of their lineup, like Albies, Ozuna, and Olsen in just 10 pitches.
That's nuts.
Yeah.
Because that's close to immaculate.
It is. So close though. But like we just need more of this in the bullpen lineup.
Yep. Yeah, they certainly do need improvement in the bullpen so that they're not losing games at the end. Because a lot of the games that they do lose, they lose in the later innings. But they got a couple NL Central, division opponents this week, so they got a chance to finally climb back up here. Those games against the Brewers later in the week are going to matter. But before that, they got a 3-game series at the Cardinals, and they're going to get national games in 2 of them. Tomorrow night they'll be playing on Fox, and then Sunday night they'll be in Sunday Night Baseball on ESPN. And then they will follow that up with 4 games at the Brewers, and those are going to be huge if they can rattle off some wins and make some ground against the Brewers, because they need to do that if they want to have any chance at claiming the top spot in the NL Central. Right now they're not in a position to do that.
This is going to determine the current standings of the NL Central.
It absolutely is. And the Cardinals, they've been a fascinating piece the last week, because in the last week, 2-1 against the Red Sox, and then here's something that nobody, and I mean absolutely nobody, except for Cardinals fans maybe jokingly predicted, a sweep of the Orioles.
Retirement home of the MLB?
I guess experience, comes and shows out sometimes. Because that's exactly what happened. But yeah,
I don't think I could bash my Cardinals interns at the Iowa Cubs anymore.
Yeah, not when they just played way better than the Cubs did in the last week. That's for sure. But yeah, the Cards are getting a ton of exposure here in the next couple weeks. They got the aforementioned games on Fox and ESPN against the Cubs. And then next weekend they'll have games on Fox and ESPN again against the Phillies. But the Cards, they've won 8 of their last 10 games after that 7-game skid. So yeah, this team is getting hot. And they climbed up from dead last in the NL Central, one of the worst teams in the MLB. They weren't quite White Sox bad, but or Marlins bad, but they were not looking pretty. And now they're up to 3rd in the NL Central, and they're only a few games away from cracking 500. But that's what'll happen when you win 8 of 10 games in a fairly competitive division. So, but yeah, upcoming for the Cards, that aforementioned 3-game series at home against the Cubs, and then they will take a trip to Cincinnati and play 3 games at the Reds. All right, AL Central time. Let's go to the Twins here. Plenty to talk about with the Twins. 26th and 23rd. I love my Twins. 3rd in the AL Central. I wish they were doing better. They should be doing better. But they decided that the last week and a half was a good time to play really bad baseball. In the last week, 0-3 at the Guardians. They got swept. And then they had another loss at the Nationals before finally breaking that 7-game losing streak, and then winning a couple of games at the Nats. And that first win at the Nats was a big one, 10-0 shutout. But yeah, just a couple weeks ago, we were talking about the Twins being the hottest team in baseball. They followed it up with being the coldest team in baseball and going on a 7-game losing streak. And most games in that losing streak weren't particularly close either. The only exceptions to that were those first and third losses at Cleveland, where Joan Duran lost the game at the end. And that first one was a Jose Ramirez go-ahead homer in the 8th inning in Game 1. Don't even ask me to explain why we have Duran pitching in the 8th inning. I don't think we ever should have him pitching in the 8th inning. He should be closer only, 9th inning. Use Griffin Jacks or Caleb Thielbar as a setup, depending on, lefties, righties. But put Duran in the 9th. I don't care whether it's lefties or righties against him. There isn't a stark difference hitting lefty-righty against Duran. And then in that Game 3 against the Guardians, Will Brennan walk-off 3-run homer in the 9th inning. So that ended up being another loss for Duran. But the Twins starting pitching is not what it needs to be right now. And we knew it was going to take a downturn after last year with, not having Sonny Gray on the mound anymore and him being at the Cardinals now. But Pablo Lopez has been underperforming. He's 4-4 on the year with a 4.72 ERA, which is 66th in the MLB. He's got a 1.12 WHIP, which is tied for 38th in the MLB, which is that's not what you want from an ace, and he's supposed to be our ace. You should at least be in the top 30. Yeah, at least be in the top 30 of all teams if you're going to be an ace. That's what's expected. And that's not what he's at right now. I mean, 66. That's worse than some third level guys. That's about where that would slot in on a lot of teams. But that's not looking good. Then you got Joe Ryan, who's second in the rotation, and he's doing better in everything other than wins losses because the offense doesn't come through half the time when he's pitching. But he's 3-3 on the year right now with a 3.15 ERA. Not spectacular, but it's at least in the top 30 in the MLB, which is, day one starter kind of number, unless, you're the Yankees or something. But his .98 whip, if you have a whip under 1, that's good. And that's good for 14th in the MLB. So that makes me wonder, is it time to start pondering the question of, do the Twins need to rearrange their starting lineup, or the starting rotation? Because this is the second year that Pablo Lopez has been in Minnesota. It's the second year he was supposed to be their ace, and it's the second year that he's not their best pitcher. Last year it was Sonny Gray, and this time around Joe Ryan is doing better. If you want to win games against other teams' aces, you need to be putting your best pitcher against them. And that's just not happening right now with Lopez. Joe Ryan is definitively pitching better. Now, some other good news for the Twins here. Royce Lewis is scheduled to be on rehab assignment soon. If I'm lucky, he'll get assigned to the Colonels, and I'll get to watch him play some.
Yeah. I was just going to say, do you know where he's going to be at?
I don't yet. He ran bases in practice for the first time since straining his right quad. That was on Monday. So, yeah, he should be back in action, in actual competition here real soon. But for the time being, the Twins will have a 3-game series versus the Rangers, and then 4-game series versus the Kansas City Royals. Speaking of the Royals, let's jump to that real quick. 32-19, second in the AL Central. That's certainly a sizable gap now that they have with the Twins. And that happened because the Royals decided that they were going to tear off on a 6-game win streak, and a dominant 6-game win streak at that. Their hitting has been incredibly hot. The least runs that they scored was 5 in Game 2 versus the A's, and they're scoring 7.5 runs per game, which you're going to win a lot of games doing that. And they scored at least 8 runs in their last 4 games, including 10 runs 3 nights ago. They handed Tariq Skubal his first L on the season, Detroit's pitcher. They 4 earned runs off of Skubal, which is a lot for him, because Skubal's been one of the best pitchers in the league. 2.25 ERA from him, which is 11th in the MLB, 72 strikeouts, which is 7th, and a .85 WHIP, which is 2nd in the MLB. That's Cy Young type of numbers. So, anytime you can get a win off of him, good on you, because that's not going to happen often. As we proved, again, first win of the year for any team off of Skubal. So, and their defense has been just as solid in every game so far here. The most runs that they allowed was 4 runs in Game 3 versus the A's in this streak. So the most runs that they've allowed is not as much as the least runs that they've scored across any games in those games. So it doesn't matter, how you rearrange the scores for each team. The Royals win all of them. Now the Royals didn't have any shutouts in this win streak, but they've only allowed 3 runs per game, which is gonna win you a lot of games regardless of what you're scoring. So that's the Royals are just looking like a phenomenal team right now. They are blistering hot. And they're going to try to keep that going here with 3-game series in St. Petersburg against the Rays, And then, as previously mentioned, they will go up to Minneapolis and play the Twins at Target Field for 4 games. And the White Sox, let's take a look at the White Sox because they're back to form, only winning 1 game in the last week. 0-3 at the Yankees, 1-2 with the Blue Jays. Eric Fetty took his first L of the season in Game 1. The lone win for the week was a 5-0 shutout in the Rogers Center, which was a solid outing for Garrett Crochet. He dropped his ERA to 3.75. And Garrett Crochet, like his numbers, they're okay. At least his ERA number. His WHIP is at .95, which is 7th in the major leagues, and 74 strikeouts on the season is 5th in the major leagues. So he's doing all right there. So aside from his ERA, he's doing pretty darn good. And in my opinion, Crochet probably is going to end up being the White Sox selection to the All-Star game if he does keep pitching at this rate. Now, some of that is because who else are the White Sox going to send? They're not going to be a multiple selection team. So that's going to be how that's go. Because, again, who else is going to end up going? Benintendi? No. That's not what's going to end up happening. It'll probably end up being Garrett Crochet. But yeah, and let's talk about this Game 1 loss versus the Orioles last night. Because this was an interesting one, at least at the very end of it. It ended on a controversial interference call, which resulted in a double play. Because what ended up happening was Andrew Benintendi pops up to shortstop, triggering the infield fly rule. So Gunnar Henderson makes the catch. But what was interesting here was Andrew Vaughn, who was a runner on second base, was called for interference with Gunnar Henderson. As he was trying to get back to the base, he stepped in Gunnar's way. Now, he didn't know that he was doing that. He wasn't looking at Henderson. But nonetheless, Henderson did have to dodge him. And so
that's interference by rulebook.
Yeah, it is.
Of course, the White Sox announcers don't agree.
Well, I mean, they're the White Sox announcers. That's to be expected. But in my biased opinion, if the call is correct, obviously, I don't want the White Sox to win as a Twins fan. But I umpire baseball too at lower levels. I would have made the same call for teams that I have no dog in the fight with. So that's the way it is. That's the way it's supposed to be. You don't have to like it, White Sox fans, but you do have to accept it. But in every loss over this last week here, the White Sox gave up at least 4 runs, and they averaged 7.17 runs allowed over that last week in the losses, not factoring in their one win. But that is a fast way to lose a lot of games when you're allowing that many runs, because you can't expect your offense to keep up. And their offense didn't even come close to keeping up. They were only they were only scoring 2.67 runs in each one of those losses. But upcoming here, they are going to have 3 more games versus the Orioles. They'll finish out that series. They will have a 3-game series versus the Blue Jays, and then they will begin a 3-game series at the Brewers. Alrighty. That is baseball so far. Blake, you want to talk about the NBA right now? We're at conference finals with the Timberwolves.
Yes. Conference semifinals. We'll cover that first. That was a win.
They did finally get that last win against the Nuggets.
They did, and it was amazing. Definitely one of the more lower scores I've seen.
By general NBA NBA standards, yeah, low scoring. By playoff standards, not so much.
Not so much. 98-90 win versus the Denver Nuggets, but the Wolves came back from a 20-point deficit,
which is the largest deficit overcome in an elimination game, I think.
Yeah.
If not, probably the largest deficit overcome in a Game 7. I mean, that is really, really impressive.
That's Game 7 for you. But yeah, absolutely stunning ending to the defending champ season, which brought them to Western Conference Finals Game 1 against the Dallas Mavericks. this was a close one that was actually tuning into. Uh, so 108 to 105, Dallas took the win. Uh,
I would have loved to
they
have
were
been able to
able.
watch that game, but I was on a baseball diamond that night, so.
Yeah. The Mavs were able to steal Minnesota's home court advantage and walk away with upset on game one. Uh,
Can you call it an
the
upset?
Mavs,
It's the conference finals. Can you really call it an upset?
well, the home court advantage.
That doesn't make it
That
an upset,
that's
though.
that's part of it. That's part of it.
The Detroit
Uh,
Pistons have a home court advantage for half the regular season. You
Good point.
can't call something an upset because the road team won.
Pistons suck.
The Pistons do suck. Um,
Uh, it was close. Or no, the the
well, the
Dallas
game was
game.
close, yes.
It was close, but this was definitely not Ant-Man's night. But he was nearing a triple double with 19 points. I think it was 8 assists that he was nearing. Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving it definitely blew past with over 30 apiece. It was definitely a dominant showing against a hostile crowd.
And
Uh,
I think that duo of Doncic and Irving makes this a more entertaining series than what the Timberwolves had against the Nuggets because the Nuggets are so heavily reliant on Jokic. I mean, Jamal Murray's their next guy up, but like, you don't talk about Jokic and Murray as like a dynamic duo the way the entire season we would talk about Doncic and Irving. They're both stars.
mhm. So following a game from Coach Finch, Finch gave a rough film session. He said, quote, "I told the guys it's been a long time since I've been this disappointed in your effort. Your performance, your attitude, your application, and attention to detail just wasn't there. The Western Conference Finals started. Not sure if they got the memo, but they got it this afternoon." End
So
quote.
hopefully that memo kicks the Timberwolves into overdrive because I mean at this point I want to see them succeed. So we got Monte Morris over there on the Timberwolves roster, ISU alum. I'd like to see him get to the NBA Finals. Over
Yeah,
on the Eastern Conference side of things, it's still kind of hard for me to cheer for the Pacers as a division rival with the Bulls, but I do want to see Halliburton do well, and an upset over the Celtics would be quite interesting. Do I think it's going to happen? No, but it would be
but I do
entertaining if
I do
nothing
want to
else.
see Monte Morris and Halliburton in the
Oh, I would love to see that. Two of
in the finals.
ISU's best guards meeting each other in the NBA Finals. That would be something
Oh,
else.
Iowa State pro sports are doing so good. I
We
mean,
develop talent.
we seen Brock Purdy in the Super Bowl, and we got the chances to see two Iowa State alum in the NBA Finals.
Yeah, I would love to see it. Now the Pacers are down 2-0 right now to the Celtics after they got bludgeoned last night. So, um, is that going to happen again? Probably not. But it's a 7 game series. They just got to win 4 out of the next 5. So
Also, I'm looking up because I have the Cyclones in the NBA program on my wall. If you
yep,
catch me doing that.
yeah. But yeah, game 2 for the Timberwolves. That's going to be tonight. That'll be at the Target Center. Um, then they'll take a trip down to Dallas for a couple games. Game 3 will be on Sunday. Game 4 on Tuesday. Game 5, if necessary, assuming that the Mavs don't sweep, and I don't think that they're going to sweep. That will be a return to the Target Center. Um, all of those games will be on TNT, so we get a good broadcast crew for all of them. Um,
We got Kevin Harlan for game one, so so that was a good reason to
it
tune in
doesn't
for that.
matter who TNT puts out; their broadcast crews are all better than ESPN's.
They're
So
amazing.
ESPN dri-
Speaking,
ESPN tries to do the jack of all trades thing with their broadcast crews, where they've got a broadcast crew that does a little bit of NBA, a little bit of college football, a little bit of like volleyball, and they're not super steeped into what they're doing. Whereas like TNT, they've got like their basketball crew, and they know basketball inside and out, and they've got their hockey crew that knows hockey inside and out. You're not going to have Wayne Gretzky on their basketball team, and you're not going to put Shaq and Chuck on their hockey team. But that's why it's so good.
Speaking of TNT,
Yeah, we got TNT is going to be delving into the realm of football for the first time ever.
let's go.
With the new college football playoff deal. ESPN subcontracted select college football playoff games to TNT across the next 5 years. So yeah, this will be the first time TNT ever does football. It'll be they'll have 4 college football games a year. They will have 2 games in the first round of the college football playoff, and they will have 2 games in the college football playoff quarterfinals.
Definitely a good way to start out. Post football season. Gives us some good entertainment for like after Christmas.
And it opens the door more so for TNT to get into the realm of media deals with conferences when the next,
Oh yes, I didn't even think about that.
when the next media deal negotiations continue to go up, because now that they're getting into college football, well, now you're not talking necessarily about splitting football from everything else in order to try to get TNT involved, with basketball and such. Now you're talking about them potentially just being involved generally, which
Like,
could be really interesting.
We're not seeing the SEC on CBS anymore, so.
Well, CBS
like,
isn't TNT Sports.
Well, I know, but like possibilities on like getting aligned with certain conferences too.
Well, I mean, I've been saying for a while though, it'd be interesting, like because your mark with the Big 12 has been very focused, on developing the basketball side of things, especially growing the Big 12 tournament down in Kansas City. But there's been talks that because he wants to. There's been talk.
If we can get the Big 12 tournament, like basketball tournament, on TNT.
Right. Well, that's not going to happen in the next 5 years, but
No.
or probably 7 years actually. The deal, a new deal would take place in 2031. But if we were to get a media rights split from football from everything else, that's what we've been talking about prior, where you sell off football to the traditional outlets at ESPN and Fox. Maybe you try to get CBS involved somehow. I don't know. But
the way we did with Kansas.
Yeah. Well, that's different with basketball.
Yeah.
I was talking more so with football. If we were to split it, because with the CBS stuff with basketball, that's all done select games through the NCAA itself. But we were talking with if they were to be split, well, now you've got TNT as a potential option as well, with the non-football sports. But if TNT is finally delving into football as well, maybe we can look at them potentially being involved with regular season games as well, which would be really interesting because TNT Sports is not really doing anything for most of the college football season. They're not getting real active until NBA and NHL start. So that will be an interesting thing. But TNT might also just be in the position of looking for new media as their deal with the NBA is on shaky ground.
Yep, they're trying to keep they're staying in talks with the NBA to like keep their stakes alive.
But NBC is trying to swoop in and take it over.
Yeah. But I don't think anything's final yet.
No, nothing is final right now. But yeah. I mean, like, inside the NBA, like the best NBA talk show ever is at stake. So that is, I mean, if TNT loses their rights, goodbye to inside the NBA.
Shaq and Shambles.
Goodbye, Shaq and Chuck, the best basketball commentary duo ever made.
Really?
Those two are something else, and Chuck says some wild things, but it's always entertaining. So I don't want to see it go, regardless of how off the wall he can be. But let's finally dive into this House versus NCAA case here. And let's roll through some of the questions that I stated in the opening monologue. But let's first one here. How will this affect walk-on athletes? Because if we're gonna have to be paying players now, if you have to pay players, well, these guys weren't even getting scholarships. So
I'm trying to put this. I'm trying to put this into perspective on Mary Kay King, or other walk-ons, or Conrad Holly.
well, the question is like, do you have to cut them from your roster now? Because if you're not even giving them a scholarship, then they're not getting really anything out of it other than the opportunity to play the sport, and to try to compete for a scholarship in the next year. So that's a tough spot to be in if you're an athletic department. Are walk-ons as an opportunity just going to get cut outright? Like, are walk-ons not going to be a thing that exists anymore?
I don't even want to think about that.
I don't either, but that's the situation that we're.
It's the reality though, because
Well, it could be.
As much impact that Conrad Holly, he's up on my wall by the way, as much impact that he makes on the Iowa State community is
People love the guy.
To see him cut over money is is he willing to quit sports and then just stay active in the community, staying active within Cyclone basketball.
Conrad Holly, student section leader? Question mark. That would honestly be a lot of fun.
Section leader.
Forget Cyclone Alley. Get Conrad Holly over there.
Conrad Holly student section.
Conrad, I love Conrad. Conrad's amazing. He's a fun guy.
Everyone does. He puts everyone before himself.
He does. He's a selfless guy, but he loves to have fun just with anybody too.
Literally.
Not just with the roster during the games, but if you run into him out and about, he's just a fun guy. If he comes in and talks to you before or after a game, it doesn't matter how the game went. He's having a good time. He loves being there.
And then the student section just yells CEO, CEO, and
we want Conrad.
You're getting his. We want Conrad. Yeah, that too. You're getting his attention like that, and he's gonna look at you.
Yeah. Let's next question here. How does Title IX factor in? That's a question.
Could we see women's sports being paid less?
That's the question. Or does it end up being women's athletes have to be paid the same amount in total as men's athletes? Or would it be a distribution by program type of thing, where football players can only get paid by football money, or basketball players can only get paid by basketball money, or volleyball players can only get paid by volleyball money? And where is it is it proportional to the revenue that they bring in, or do they have to find a way to distribute it equally, where they're pouring 15 times as much money into volleyball as what they're making? That's a tough question that's going to have to be answered here in the near future, because this is likely going to have to take these new rules that are coming down from this settlement are probably going to have to take place in the next athletic season, beginning here in the fall of 2024.
And you did mention that's extremely difficult process work for athletic directors, and I'm sure Jamie Pollard has thought of the possibility of this situation as it came up.
Well, ever since this case was filed, it's been on the back of the minds of every athletic director in college sports, from the D3 level all the way up to the rich dogs in Power 5. Your Texas and your Texas A&Ms. Now, those really rich schools are probably a lot more happy about it. The ones that are getting those Big Ten and SEC payouts and are getting a lot more booster support. But
whatever they want.
If you're a G5 or an FCS school, good luck.
Yeah.
You're gonna need it. But
they're gonna be having players that actually want to play for them.
Right, but I mean, even if you're in the Big 12 or the ACC, Now the difference between the haves and the have-nots compared to the Big Ten and the SEC is going to grow by probably by an order of magnitude, considering the Big Ten and the SEC are getting almost double the payout that the Big 12 and the ACC are getting. I mean, the ACC just eclipsed $30 million per school very recently, and the Big Ten is going to be getting like 75 million per school here. So maybe this ends up just boosting schools like Northwestern, but it's a really, really tough process. Here's another question here. How will this affect recruitment pitches? Because now
We've made, well, yeah,
Go ahead.
we've made a significant like process like with our like athletic facilities.
But that might not be as big of a factor now.
Yeah, I did. Me and a friend of the show, Cody, at the Cyclone Tailgate tour, we did talk with Jamie Pollard on like some of the facilities being on pause.
Yeah, that was something that got mentioned.
Like wrestling and such. But I don't know how much of an appeal that Sci-Town is going to be like for recruiting.
Right, and that's one of the things. That was one of the things in the amateurism era, which is now behind us as of yesterday. Where, if you weren't paying athletes, well, you wanted to give them the best experience possible. So if you had really, really nice training facilities, yeah, they were going to look at that as one of the big bonuses. Whereas now, that's kind of a side deal. That's just, it's not as big of a factor anymore, because at the end of the day, who's paying top dollar? Because if you're making a lot of money, then you can make your experience great kind of wherever you are. But then again, when you're recruiting athletes, are you telling them directly how much you're willing to pay them? And does recruitment just become a bidding war?
To be.
That's a really tough position to be in. If you're a coach, because now if you're a coach, you have to keep those kind of finances in the back of your mind too. Potentially knowing how much money you have available to your program to spend. So now you've got your position is now, you're not just a coach, you're a coach / accountant. That's a really, really tough spot to be in.
Get ready to learn accounting. Oh my god.
Yeah. Bill Fennelly, women's basketball coach / financial advisor.
Dude.
Yeah.
Build the statue. Another reason to build the statue.
It'll be an interesting one. I wish I would have. I didn't have the case in the back of my mind when I was at Cyclone Tailgate Tour when it was in Cedar Rapids, but I did stop and talk to Coach Christy Johnson Lynch for a while, and this is something that would have been an interesting conversation piece to bring up, but like, I mean, my favorite college sports to watch, my top 2 favorite college sports to watch, are not revenue sports. It's volleyball and wrestling are my top 2, and then baseball is probably third after that. So and then maybe you throw in basketball and football. I'm real big into volleyball, wrestling, baseball, and to potentially see the situation of finances potentially straining these programs even harder than they already are, because they don't have a ton of money to throw around, and now you got to stretch every dollar farther. Because if you got to pay athletes, well, that's an extra expense, and it's a big one. Labor is a big expense. So yeah, and then I guess that's the final question is, how do non-revenue sports fit into this jigsaw puzzle? And if a jigsaw puzzle is the illusion we're going for here, so I'm sure you've done like the oil painted like Terry Redlin like jigsaw puzzles, but at least there's a design to them. This is like a blank white jigsaw puzzle where you can't match the colors up to try to fit pieces together. You have no idea what you're doing here. You got a 1 in 1,000 chance of trying to get the two puzzle pieces fit together. And yeah, this is a really, really tough spot. So
some of the stuff I just can't imagine the impact of our volleyball program wrestling.
See, that makes me really nervous because one of the ways, I mean, there was a lot of great stuff that came out of Title IX. Don't get me wrong, but it did backfire in the sense that it canned a lot of other men's college sports that were not, generating revenue. At Iowa State, we saw this in the sense that we lost. Baseball was the big one. There's a lot of demand to have baseball back, and we just don't have the money for it right now. And then we also saw men's swimming and men's gymnastics go by the wayside as well. But if this could also backfire in the sense of causing a lot more sports to be cut, and taking away opportunities from a lot of athletes who are wanting to develop those skills, and maybe Title IX, and maybe Title IX is able to protect the women's sports side of things, but like, what happens to wrestling? What happens to baseball at the schools that have it? What happens to track and cross country?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that.
I mean, maybe volleyball is able to be protected by Title IX because I'm thinking, we just had the PVF emerge here in the last year. League One volleyball is also going to be starting a competing pro league here as well for volleyball. So if volleyball is able to be protected by Title IX and we can still develop for that and keep pro volleyball alive in America, that would be wonderful. I don't want to see that go away. I really enjoyed it here in its inaugural season. Omaha Supernovas, my team, first ever champs. They'll always be the first. But I mean, like wrestling, that's going to develop because a lot of wrestlers that go into pro combat sports, that's development for the UFC, and some of them like the theatrics of WWE and go into that as well. But I think it's going to increase the dependence on private paid clubs for athlete development that just don't have the same kind of exposure. And it could deteriorate the ability of the U.S. to compete at an international level in wrestling without collegiate development. And that's one thing. I enjoy watching wrestling at the Olympics, and it's without college development. I think it might hamper that.
All I could say is Brent Bloom is going to have a field day with this.
Yeah, that'll be interesting watching the other media that comes out about this later in the day and in the next week. I'm interested to see what the guys at like Locked On are saying, what the guys at 24/7 Sports are saying, the articles that we're going to be seeing on Bleacher Report. What are we going to see from Pete Mundo down at Heartland College Sports? What are we going to see from the talk shows on Fox and ESPN and CBS and NBC? There's a lot of navigating that comes to do with this, and I shouldn't even call this navigating. This isn't like navigating a map that already exists that you're just trying to find your way through. This is like Lewis and Clark. We're Lewis and Clarking our way through college sports right now because we have no freaking clue what is in front of us. We just know that we don't know. That's the situation we're in.
That is the unfortunate reality.
But I really, really hope that this doesn't end up backfiring and killing a lot of college sports because I don't want to see our athletes lose these opportunities.
Yeah. So overall, I'm grateful to be a part of this area, especially in cycling sports with college, I would say men's basketball, rising after 2-22 season, and then seeing Bill Finley's program perform the way it did.
Totally exceeding expectations last year.
Yeah, volleyball, football last year.
Right, and that's my hope is that Title IX will at least be able to, protect the women's sports so that we don't have to worry about volleyball and women's basketball going by the wayside. And the way women's basketball is growing, it might become a revenue sport here within the next few years anyway, with how fast it's growing. but and volleyball is growing quickly too, and hopefully the PVF grows and continues to publicize it as a pro level, because if you publicize it at a pro level, the collegiate sport will grow as well.
Probably growing because of you too.
Well, Iowa State's volleyball was already one of the bigger programs in the country as far as attendance. We're the only school in the country with top 10 attendance in women's basketball and in volleyball. Um, so that's like I enjoyed that atmosphere that we bring to that here at Iowa State, and I hope Title IX is able to continue to protect that. But what worries me with sports like wrestling, which are not going to have the same types of protections under Title IX because they're a men's sport. Most schools, wrestling brings in like $12 a year. It just doesn't bring in anything because they don't sell seats. It doesn't drive TV revenue. We're one of the few schools in the country where we actually get, high wrestling attendance. Us, it's Oklahoma State, and a bunch of Big Ten schools mostly, and a few ACC schools that are driving the bulk of wrestling attendance. And you're just not seeing that elsewhere in the country. So if that wrestling attendance really starts to be a problem for schools that need to pay athletes, if we start seeing wrestling programs get cut en masse across the country, there might not be much of a college sport of wrestling left to compete in, even amongst the schools that do survive. Because you think a lot of the schools that are some of the schools that are dominant in wrestling are like your Ivies. They are not going to have money to throw around. Their athletics departments do not have a ton of money, unless the school, as an academic institution, starts pulling a lot of money out of, because the Ivy schools, like, they're rich, but they're rich in academics, not their athletic department. So they would have to start pulling money from their endowment to try to keep those programs alive, and I'm not sure that they're going to want to do that, because that's not the identity of those schools, and that's just a really, really unfortunate place to have to be in. But this is uncharted territory. This is exploration that we're dealing with, and there's a lot of hazards ahead, but that is the situation that we have now entered. But we're gonna keep giving you updates as we learn more here on the Cornfield Sports Pod. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at CSportsPod. Blake, where can they find you?
They could always find me at BlakeAttack1846.
You can find me at SFMattISU. Tap the follow button on Spotify, the plus button on Apple, subscribe on YouTube, Rumble, hit that little bell so that you always get a notification.
This is Blake Peterson.
I'm Matt Menson, and this has been the Cornfield Sports Pod.